picture this. It's November 1891.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, exactly. You're in a cluster of buildings at Tavies Inn in London. Outside, the streets are just thick with smog, rumbling with horse-drawn carriages.
Classic Victorian atmosphere.
Right. But inside this dimly lit room, there's a husband and wife. And they are meticulously painting this massive 8-foot-tall, 7-sided wooden vault.
And we should probably mention what's inside the vault.
Oh, yeah. Right in the center of this vault is a coffin.
Which just sounds like the climax of a gothic horror novel, honestly.
It really does. But they're not, hiding a body. They were preparing an initiation.
Yeah.
Today, we are taking a deep dive into the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, using Felix John Taylor's historical text as our guide. And the mission here is to uncover how this eccentric occult group, built on forged documents, by the way, somehow became a serious creative incubator for some of the biggest literary and theatrical minds of the era.
It's a wild transition.
It really is. I've been thinking of it as like a highly exclusive Victorian live-action role play. LARP.
LARP that accidentally birthed modern literature. That is actually a great way to frame it.
Right. So take us into that room. Who are the people with the coffin?
So the couple in that room is Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers and his wife, Moyna.
Okay.
Moyna was this brilliant artist. She actually trained at the Slade School of Art. And Mathers was an occultist who had spent years just obsessively synthesizing alchemy, astrology, tarot, all of it.
And he's going to get into the coffin.
Yes. He was literally going to lie inside that coffin, playing the role of this mythical 15th century figure, Christian Rosicrucian. And this was all to initiate a woman named Annie Horniman into their highly secretive Second Order.
Annie Horniman is such a fascinating character in all this. She's like the quintessential new woman of the era, right?
Oh, absolutely. She's riding her bicycle all around London in bloomers, which was a huge statement at the time. Totally independent.
And rich, right. She's bankrolling them.
Exactly. She paid for the paint on that vault. She funded the whole operation.
Which highlights something really interesting about the Golden Dawn. They were surprisingly progressive, especially regarding gender.
Very progressive. Traditional Freemasonry back then was strictly a boys' club. It was heavily policed, very rigid.
No women allowed.
Right. But the Golden Dawn, which was founded in 1888, allowed women to join on completely equal footing with men.
Which is great. But, and this is a big but, to bypass the established, gatekeepers of Victorian society, they had to invent a lineage.
You needed authority, yeah.
You needed to seem ancient. So we get what Taylor calls the origin fiction.
The massive forgery. Yeah.
Right. The whole foundation of the order rested on these cipher manuscripts. And the story was that they were found in a secondhand bookshop by a coroner named William Wynne Westcott.
Which is just so convenient.
So convenient. And these papers miraculously contain the contact info for this German Rosicrucian adept.
Fräulein Sprengel.
Yes, Fräulein Sprengel, who supposedly wrote back and authorized Westcott and Mathers to start a British branch. But that's not what actually happened, is it?
No. The historical consensus is that Westcott faked the entire thing.
Wow.
The quote-unquote ancient paper they used had an 1809 watermark on it.
You'd think a coroner would be better at faking death-related documents.
You would. And the letters from Fräulein Sprengel, they were clearly written by someone with an atrocious grasp of German syntax. It was very obviously fabricated.
And didn't they literally steal the plot for this origin story?
Oh, yeah. They lifted it almost directly from a best-selling 1842 thriller by Edward Bulwer Lytton called Zanoni. In the book, the protagonist finds a coded manuscript in a bookstall.
It's so brazen. But, I want to push back a bit on the usual reading here.
Yeah.
It is so easy for us to just dismiss these founders as con artists and the members as just gullible dupes.
Right.
But I just don't buy that entirely. Because to me, it feels more like a Silicon Valley startup founder faking their early user metrics to get venture capital. Like, they're faking the numbers because they genuinely believe their tech product is revolutionary.
That's a really interesting parallel.
Like, were they just prioritizing a deeper spiritual truth over boring historical fact?
Well, that framing actually perfectly aligns with how the Victorian occult revival operated. Because for someone like Mathers, truth wasn't strictly empirical, it was experiential.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means that if you perform a ritual and that ritual produces a profound psychological transformation in the initiate, then the system is true. That's the only truth that matters to a magician.
Oh, wow. So the mechanism of belief is actually more important than the authenticity of the paper.
Precisely that. The feeling of ancient authority, even if it was faked, was a psychological tool. It bypassed the rational, skeptical mind.
It let people suspend their disbelief.
Exactly. And that specific lack of rigid historical dogma, the freedom to just experiment with consciousness, that is exactly what attracted people who thrive on imagination.
Which brings us perfectly to W.B. Yeats.
Yes.
We all know Yeats as this legendary poet. But to understand why he joined the Golden Dawn, we actually have to look at why he quit other mystical groups first.
Right. He was part of Madame Blavatsky's Theosophical Society before this.
Yeah, and he quit. And not because it was too weird for him. He quit because it wasn't practical enough.
He was deeply frustrated by the lack of actionable experimentation in theosophy. There's this famous story where he tried to summon the ghost of a burnt flower.
Wait, really? A burnt flower?
Yes. And when the leadership balked at his practical experiments, at one point he asked members to sleep with powdered indigo under their pillows so they could track dream manipulation.
Oh my God.
And then theosophical leadership was like, absolutely not. So Yeats realized theosophy was just another form of abstract dogma that demanded blind obedience.
He didn't want a new religion to just blindly obey. He wanted, a methodology.
Yes, he wanted tools.
And the Golden Dawn handed him this incredibly complex framework, like the Kabbalistic tree of life, which sounds very mystical, but functionally, how was Yeats actually using it?
So think of the tree of life as a massive cognitive filing system. It's a diagram of 10 interconnected spheres, and the Golden Dawn taught its members to map everything onto this grid. Every color, every emotion, myth, element, it all had a place.
So it's organization.
Exactly. So when Yeats is writing poetry, he isn't just sitting around waiting for the muse to strike. He is actively navigating this pre-built psychological map.
He was also using the lesser ritual of the pentagram.
Yeah.
Right? The text describes him standing in a room, wielding a steel dagger, drawing pentagrams in the air, and vibrating Hebrew names, which is quite an image for a lanky Irish poet.
It is.
But what is the actual psychological mechanism there? Why the dagger and the chanting?
It's a grounding mechanism. It's a way of creating a completely sterile mental workspace. By performing these highly physical, very sensory actions, he is forcefully banishing all the chaotic noise of modern Victorian life.
He's getting into the zone.
Getting into a state of hyperfocus, yeah. And then once he was in that state, he would use Mathers' talismanic images.
Which were, what, painted cardboard?
Basically, yeah, colored geometric symbols painted on cardboard.
And by staring at these shapes, Yeats reports having this spontaneous vision of a black titan rising from ancient ruins. It completely bypassed his conscious writer's block.
Because the symbols act as a direct key to the subconscious. For Yeats, this proved that symbols weren't just pretty decorative elements for poems. They were active engines capable of altering human consciousness.
And he took this exact cognitive toolkit and just poured it into his writing, like The Secret Rose.
Yes, his writing was infused with it.
He even tried to scale this up, didn't he? To a national level. He partnered with Maud Gonne, the Irish revolutionary, to create the Order of Celtic Mysteries.
The Castle Project, yeah.
Yeah. They literally planned to buy McDermott's castle, this ruin on an island in Ireland, and use the Golden Dawn's framework to summon ancient Irish gods.
Yeats really believed that the sterile, industrialized modern world was just crushing the human spirit, and he saw the secret knowledge inherent in Irish mythology as the antidote.
So if he could forge a unified national identity through these symbols...
Magic becomes a political tool, exactly.
Okay, but wait, I'm stuck on a core contradiction here. Based on everything we've read in Taylor's text about his methodology, did Yeats actually believe he was shooting literal, physics-defying magic out of a wand? Or was this just the world's most elaborate, hyper-focused, creative writing prompt?
That's the big question. And the text situates Yeats in this really fascinating middle ground. He believed in the great memory, which is sort of a collective unconscious that Carl Jung would later formalize. So Yeats didn't necessarily think he was breaking the laws of thermodynamics, but he deeply believed that psychological forces, when summoned with focused intent, could physically alter the world by altering the people in it.
Wow. So magic is a metaphor for poetry, and poetry is a form of magic.
Yes. Perfectly said. There's a draft of his unfinished novel, The Speckled Bird, where a character who is clearly based on Mathers accuses the Yeats character of caring more for some charm of color or some charm of words than the terrifying reality of true magic.
Ah, so Mathers saw him as just an artist.
Yeah. Yeats was using the system to build something beautiful, not just to wield power.
Okay, but if Yeats used this structure to organize his art, we have another prominent member who used the exact same system to completely disrupt the societal framework around her.
Florence Farr.
Florence Farr. She wasn't just organizing thoughts, she was shattering boundaries.
She is arguably the most dynamic figure in this entire narrative. I mean, she was a stage actress, an independent feminist, and just heavily embedded in the avant-garde.
And she flew up the ranks of the Golden Dawn. She actually became the premonstratrix.
The chief teacher and disciplinarian of the temple, yes.
And she's living this wild dual life. In public, she's managing the Avenue Theater. She debuts George Bernard Shaw's breakthrough play, Arms and the Man. She writes a subversive society novel called The Dancing Faun, which had a cover by Aubrey Beardsley, by the way.
She is literally the epicenter of Victorian cultural progression.
Right. Yet in private, her occult life is completely radical, which absolutely infuriated George Bernard Shaw.
Oh, he hated it.
Because Shaw is the ultimate rationalist socialist, right? And he's writing her these scathing letters mocking her love of miracles. But she totally ignores him.
She didn't just ignore him, she doubled down.
Yeah, she did.
She wrote a book on Egyptian magic. She spent all this time at the British Museum and actually claimed to have made astral contact with a mummified Egyptian chantress named Mutimenu.
Which is such an amazing detail, especially since modern medical scans revealed that that specific mummy is actually a male body that was just heavily padded to look feminine.
The fictions just keep layering into reality.
They really do. But Farr took this contact incredibly seriously. She basically goes rogue. She forms a secret subgroup within the Golden Dawn with a chemist named Alan Bennett.
Yes.
And they start brewing hell broth and using spermaceti candles to physically materialize Taft-Thartharath, the spirit of Mercury. You have to unpack the mechanics of this for me. Why spermaceti candles?
Okay, so spermaceti is this waxy substance derived from the head cavities of sperm whales.
Gross, but okay.
Very Victorian. But in alchemical and occult traditions, because it burns incredibly cleanly and brightly, it was believed to be the absolute perfect, pure medium for receiving ethereal vibrations. So combining that with the specific chemical compounds of their hell broth, Bennett and Farr were essentially practicing spiritual engineering.
It's Victorian biohacking.
Hi.
No, think about it. Today, biohacking is all about bypassing traditional doctors to optimize your biology, right? Taking unapproved peptides, using red light therapy, doing extreme cold plunges.
Taking matters into your own hands.
Right. And Farr and Bennett were bypassing the priests and the male-dominated societal structures to optimize their spiritual agency.
That analogy holds up perfectly, actually, when you look at her motivations. Farr was absolutely relentless in her pursuit of autonomy.
Yeah.
The hell broth and the rituals weren't just spooky parlor tricks for her. This was her creating an open-source spiritual software that no man, not George Bernard Shaw, and eventually not even MacGregor Mathers, could regulate.
But, and here's where it all falls apart. When you have rogue members brewing hell broth and completely ignoring the established hierarchy, that absolute freedom is inevitably going to collide with Mathers' need for control. The rubber band has to snap.
It always does. It's the life cycle of almost every utopian or highly concentrated esoteric group.
Yeah.
By the mid to late 1890s, the original structure collapses. And, it doesn't collapse because of an astral attack. It collapses due to money, paranoia, and just the inherent friction between free-thinking artists and rigid dogma.
Let's follow the money, because this part baffles me. Mathers and his wife Moyna moved to Paris. Right. And they're living this highly extravagant lifestyle, which is entirely funded by Annie Horniman.
Yes, the woman they initiated in the vault.
Right. But Horniman eventually cuts off the funds, and it's because of another member, Edward Berridge.
Right. So Berridge was promoting these highly controversial free love teachings of an American spiritualist named Thomas Lake Harris.
Okay.
Furthermore, and more seriously, he was accused of harassing female students within the order. So Horniman, who was expecting a safe, disciplined environment, demanded that Mathers expel or discipline Berridge.
Wait, I'm stuck here. From a purely strategic standpoint, if Horniman is the one paying Mathers' rent in Paris, why on earth would he bite the hand that feeds him just to protect a guy who is harassing students? It makes zero sense.
Logically, it makes no sense, but psychologically, it makes perfect sense if you understand Mathers' state of mind.
Okay, explain.
To Mathers, his absolute authority was the only thing keeping the entire magical system intact. If he allowed Horniman, who was a wealthy donor, yes, but structurally his subordinate, if he allowed her to dictate his leadership decisions, the entire illusion of his supreme divine authority crumbles.
Oh, wow. So he chose to protect his authoritarian self-image over his financial survival.
Exactly. And he becomes intensely paranoid as a result. He starts demanding absolute written submission from all senior members.
Written submission.
Yeah. And to justify this sudden dictatorship, Mathers claimed that he alone was in direct physical contact with the secret chiefs.
Secret chiefs, who are they?
They were supposed to be these superhuman ascended entities who ran the universe. And Mathers said only he could talk to them. So when Horniman challenged this and refused to submit to his arbitrary rules, he expelled his primary benefactor from the order.
That is wild. But this isn't just a Victorian magical feud.
No.
If you think about it, it applies to almost any passionate online fandom or a disruptive tech startup or even a hyper-niche political movement today.
Oh, absolutely.
There's always that inevitable collision between the chaotic creative energy that starts the community and the eventual corporate dogma required to scale it. The individual freedom clashes with the structural authority.
It is the universal engine of schism. The initial spark requires absolute freedom to explore and break the rules, but sustaining an organization, that requires discipline, hierarchy, and rules.
You can't have both.
No. Those two forces cannot coexist indefinitely without a pressure release.
Let me provoke you on this, looking at it from Mathers' perspective.
Okay.
If Mathers genuinely believed his magical system was dealing with the literal, objective fabric of the universe, especially with people like Florence Farr running around brewing physical hell broth, totally unsupervised.
Right.
Did he have to become a dictator? Did he have to crack the whip precisely because these brilliant artists were treating his dangerous science like their own personal bohemian art project?
From his perspective, absolutely he did. I mean, if you truly believe you are guarding the volatile secrets of the cosmos, democracy is not just inconvenient, it's a profound danger.
Right, you don't vote on gravity.
Exactly. You cannot have a committee vote on the laws of physics or the nature of the astral plane. Mathers felt the artists were diluting the purity of the occult science with all their poetry and theater.
But the paradox there is that without those artists, the magic dies in a vacuum.
And that is the ultimate tragedy of MacGregor Mathers. Without Yeats's poetry popularizing the symbolism, without Farr's theatricality, without Moyna's incredible visual art bringing that vault to life,
There would have been nothing.
the Golden Dawn would have been just another boring, forgotten Masonic offshoot gathering dust in some archive. The creativity of the members is what made the magic real to the outside world. So in trying to protect the system, Mathers destroyed the very community that validated his genius.
It's an incredible story of unintended consequences. We're looking at a society built on blatant forgeries, stolen plots from Gothic novels, and just elaborate fictions.
Yet it produced undeniable historical realities.
It really did.
It launched legendary literary careers. It provided women with unprecedented leadership roles and agency at a time when society offered them very, very little.
Yeah.
And it left a permanent mark on modern art, poetry, and theater.
Which brings us to a final, really fascinating concept from the source material to leave you with. During that massive fight over Berge's behavior, when Annie Horniman was complaining about the morals of the group, Mathers dismissed her with a very specific argument.
The mask argument.
Yes. He said that when you enter the order, you wear a magical mask. You leave your normal, outer personality and all your everyday morals behind in the mundane world.
Which is undeniably a very convenient excuse for terrible behavior.
Definitely. But psychologically, the concept of the magical mask is profoundly relevant to how humans operate in constructed spaces.
Especially today.
Yes. Think about our highly curated digital avatars today. Think about your professional LinkedIn profile versus, say, your anonymous Reddit account or your Instagram persona.
They're all different masks.
Exactly. We are all putting on masks to interact in these constructed virtual spaces, leaving our mundane selves behind to operate by a completely different set of rules. So the question we want to leave you with today is this: which mask is the real you?
Right. Is it possible that the fictions we invent about ourselves, the avatars we meticulously construct, are actually the truest expressions of our internal desires?
Are we all just stepping into that seven-sided vault, lying in the coffin and LARPing our way into reality?
Yeah.
Think about it.